I poured 47 boxes of their wedding gifts into the low-country marsh while the rose petals were still being swept off the ballroom floor because my new daughter-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "I wish you weren't part of our family." If you've ever wondered what happens when a 67-year-old grandmother with a paid-off house, flawless paperwork, and a very good memory decides she's done being polite, keep watching to the end and tell me what city you're watching from. You won't guess the last thing I sold. My name is Lillian Hale. I'm 67 years old, a widow, and a grandmother to one freckled tornado named June. I live in a cedar-scented bungalow outside Charleston, South Carolina, where the Spanish moss hangs low and gossip travels faster than lightning over pluff mud. I was a school secretary for 32 years. I know how to keep a ledger, how to calm a room with a look, and how to file a form so tight that even a hurricane can't blow it open. My only son, Evan, married Brielle at the Harborview Hotel, the kind of place where the napkins have weight and the chandeliers look like frozen rain. I paid for nothing but the boring things, or so they said: vendor deposits, hotel logistics, the bar package, insurance, what Brielle called the unsexy backbone. The flashy bits her mother fawned over? Those happened because the backbone held. I didn't want attention. This was Evan's day. I bought a dove gray dress, flattering, quiet, respectful, and pinned my late husband's tie pin to the collar as a secret comfort. I wore sensible shoes and a smile I had ironed flat. At check-in, the concierge directed me to the bride's suite for a family photo. I was halfway down the hall when the door opened and Brielle stepped into the threshold, hand on the frame like she was holding up a painting. "Oh," she said, and the word had splinters. "Lillian." "Brielle," I said, matching her smile, because Southern women have survived worse with nothing but a smile. She blocked the door, lifted her chin, and let me see the part of her I'd been trying not to see for a year. "We're keeping this side of the day intimate," she said. "For family." I heard the click of lipstick caps, the little gasp of a cousin behind her, the rustle of tulle. The photographer looked down at her camera as if it needed polishing. Someone's champagne glass laughed. "I'm family," I said gently. Her mouth made a little bow. "I told Evan last night," she said, voice airy, eyes iron. "This is my moment, and we need a certain aesthetic. I wish you weren't part of our family today. Not in the photo, not later, not we'll do one at the reception." She wished I wasn't part of their family. I have lived long enough to know wishes can come true faster than people think. I said, "I understand," because I did. Then I stepped back, felt the carpet under my sensible shoes, and turned away. I heard a bridesmaid whisper, "Is that the mom?" like I was a rumor. I walked past the concierge's polished smile, past the fountain tile that looked like shattered seashells, out through the revolving door into the gold Charleston heat. Outside, the marsh smell rolled in sweet and honest. A wedding was happening upstairs. I stood under the hotel awning and dialed 3 numbers I never call unless I mean it. First, "Hey, this is Lillian." "The freight desk, please." The Harborview's loading bay knows my voice. I set up all large deliveries to pass through the back to keep the lobby clear. The registry hall, 47 boxes scheduled to arrive after the reception, was on my account. I paid the white glove fee personally because Brielle's mother wanted the wow moment in their honeymoon suite. I'd been told 10 times, "Don't worry, Lillian, we've got it." I had worried anyway. I always do. Second, "Harriet?" "It's Lil." Harriet is my travel agent, old school, stubborn, brilliant. We moved Evan and Brielle's honeymoon itinerary into my umbrella policy when I prepaid it as their gift. Flights, transfers, ocean villa, the whole dream. Brielle sent me a Pinterest board. I sent Harriet the card. On every document the payer was me. Third, Nora. Yes, listed. Today, Nora is my realtor. The house, 3 bedrooms, deep porch, pocket doors, oak-like port honey, sat 5 miles from the marsh, staged and ready. I'd bought it in my trust as a surprise wedding gift. We'd planned a brunch reveal, keys in a velvet box, a bow on the banister, my husband's old brass door knocker polished to a shine. The deed? Never transferred. I had written the speech I would give my son about starting a life where birdsong beats alarms. I had polished it until it felt like the smooth pebble you keep in your pocket for luck. I stood under the awning and swallowed that speech so deep I could never cough it back up. Nora didn't blink. "Backup buyers?" she asked. "The nurses with the twins." "Cash. They'll meet you at 6, I said. "Tell them I'll leave the lemon bars on the counter." The fourth call was not business. It was to a man named Roy who knows every creek in the Francis Marion like he knows the creases in his palm. "You still got that flatboat?" I asked. "For you, Miss Lillian?" "Always." "Bring a rake," I said. "And a camera. We're cleaning something out of my life." I didn't storm. I didn't cry. I did what I've done my whole life. I executed. The wedding happened without me in the photos. I slipped into the ceremony and sat in the far pew like a stranger, because the church is God's house and he never turns anyone away. I watched my son promise a forever he believed was soft and kind. I watched Brielle walk a path lined with fresh roses, the scent of someone else's garden heavy in the air. When they kissed, I clapped once, quiet, and meant it for the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap. The reception was a blur of gold light. I ate a small plate of chicken that tasted like apology and went home before the cake. At 9:05 p.m., the freight bay called. "Miss Hale? We have your delivery." "Redirect," I said. "Same county. Different view." By 9:40, Roy's flatboat idled behind my truck at the edge of a marsh I've known since I was young enough to be reckless. Crickets stitched the air together. The moon smudged itself across the water. The boxes waited in my truck bed like trophies, boxed cookware stacked like drumbeats, a hand-blown glass centerpiece nested in foam, the espresso machine she'd circled in 3 different registry apps. Roy climbed out and whistled low. "Fancy trash." "Not trash," I said, and I meant it. "Lessons." I slit the packing tape one by one. Where I could, I pulled the packing slips, recorded order numbers, and set high-value items aside for return or donation. I wasn't going to pollute the marsh or the world. But the mountain of duplicate gadgets, the vanity monogrammed nonsense, the extra throw pillows she'd put on 3 lists because she liked the color name, salted cloud, those I staged carefully on the boat in a heap of box, ribbon, tissue, and self-importance. "Ready?" Roy asked. I nodded. We pushed off, and the flatboat cut a clean seam through black water. Dragonflies flitted like arguments. I thought of Brielle's voice, "I wish you weren't part of our family," and I thought of the 47 times in the past year I had changed a plan, held a tongue, bent a budget so Evan could have peace. I thought of what wishing does when it's not watched. At the far edge, where the grass thickened and the water grew polite, Roy killed the engine. The marsh sighed. I lifted the first box, the kind of blender that could liquefy a whole pineapple, and let the empty carton slide from my hands. The cardboard kissed the water and lay still, then tipped, then swallowed itself. Roy raised the camera. "For your records," he said. "For my dignity," I answered. "We didn't leave a mess. We didn't poison a thing." The boxes we let go were flattened and tied with twine, retrieved after they soaked, then hauled to the recycling center at dawn. The gifts themselves, the silly duplicates and the third-string ornaments, went to a charity warehouse when morning opened its eyes. The only thing I left in the marsh that night was the last flicker of a hope that if I were quiet enough, people would treat me like I belonged. We made 3 runs. On the last one, I reached into my bag and pulled out the embossed envelope holding the honeymoon itinerary. I didn't throw it. I took a photo of it with the confirmation code in crisp focus, then texted it to Harriet with 3 words, "Invoke cancel for any reason." On it, she replied, because Harriet is a poem when she works. By midnight, the hotel's loading dock was empty. In the honeymoon suite, a bell cart parked next to a champagne bucket waited for the wow moment that would never arrive. Somewhere on the 6th floor, a woman I didn't recognize in the mirror was laughing into a camera for her followers while holding a bouquet paid for by a woman she had wished away. At 12:17 a.m., I slid into a booth at the only diner still open near the causeway. The waitress brought me coffee without me asking. "You look like you did something true," she said. "I did something right," I said, and I tipped like a woman who no longer funds other people's fantasies. By 1:45, I was on my porch. The air had softened. I sat in my husband's wicker chair and watched the dark yard hold itself. My phone buzzed once. It was Evan. Mom, we didn't see you in any of the pictures. Are you okay? I typed and deleted and typed again. Then I wrote the truth small enough to fit in a son's palm. I'm fine, baby. You looked handsome. Rest. I didn't mention the wish. I didn't mention the marsh. I didn't mention that in 5 hours, the nurses with the twins would be holding a deed with my signature. I didn't mention the lemon bars cooling on my counter under a towel. I slept 5 hours with the easy, guiltless sleep of a woman who has paid her debts. At 8:12 a.m., Brielle's number lit up my phone. I let it ring out. Then I called Harriet. Confirm? I asked. Confirmed, she said. Flights canceled, villa released, transfers refunded per policy. Because you were the payer and the policyholder, there's no appeal. I'll donate the travel credit to your name if you want it. Give something to the women's shelter, I said. The rest, send to me. You taking a trip, Lil? I might, I said. I might take several. At 8:33, the Harborview's front desk left a message. Ms. Hale, quick question about the registry delivery. The courier shows it was received at your dock, then, your instructions. Should we reschedule? No, I said to the empty room, and then remembered to call back and say it out loud. At noon, I wrapped a tray of lemon bars and carried them to the house with the deep porch. The nurses arrived 5 minutes later with a car seat between them like a crown. Their faces were tired and expectant, new parent bright. You said your timeline was tight, the taller one said. We didn't want to get our hopes up. Hope is just preparation waiting for proof, I said, and handed them the keys. They cried the way women cry when a door opens in a wall they've been beating with their bare hands. I cried the way a mother cries when she finally decides her love is going where it's treated like treasure. At 1:30, we signed in Nora's office. At 1:34, I got a text from Evan. We're heading to the airport. Brielle says hi. There was a photo of them in matching cream travel outfits, the kind influencers wear to pretend an airplane seat is a chaise lounge. I didn't reply. At 2:10, another text, they won't check us in. Something about the reservation being canceled? Did the card fall off? Ask your wife, I wrote, and put my phone face down. By 3 o'clock, the house was theirs. The deed stayed warm from our hands. We ate lemon bars over the kitchen sink like teenagers and laughed, because laughter fills rooms faster than furniture. I left them the brass door knocker anyway, the one I'd polished. I screwed it to their door and said, it belonged to a good man. They touched it like a promise. On my way home, I drove past the Harborview. Outside, the valet stand looked like theater, people wearing sunglasses under a cloudy sky, trunks popping open like confetti cannons, everyone thirsty for the next scene of their lives. Evan stood beside a luggage cart with Brielle and her mother, faces pinched, phones pressed to their cheeks. Brielle saw my car. Our eyes met like swords. She mouthed one word. Please. I did not stop. Wishes work both ways. That night, Charleston hummed with the day's fun. I made chicken salad and fed the neighbor's tabby because she likes my porch better than her own. I put my feet up. I expected the phone to explode. It did not. Silence can be an instrument if you play it well. At 10:22 p.m., the first real message came, not a text, not a voicemail, but a video. Someone at the hotel filmed Brielle at the check-in counter arguing softly, then loudly, then astonishingly loudly for someone wearing $1,200 of cream linen. What do you mean canceled? Our suite, our transfers, do you know who my followers are? The clerk kept his training smile on with a staple gun. The comments under the video were not kind. The internet loves a bride until it doesn't. I watched it once, then put my phone away. I had lemon bars to cut and a trip to consider. In the morning, I would call the bank and tidy up the last ribbon. In the morning, I would make the part of the plan that most people would call cruel and I would call neat. In the morning, I would sell the house they thought I'd given them. And I would not even tell them. When a person says, I wish you weren't part of our family, they think they're speaking emotionally. I take things literally. If I am not part of your family, then my money is not part of your family, my logistics are not part of your family, my gifts are not part of your family, and the roof you are about to move under is not part of your family. My therapist, yes, I started one at 67 because self-respect doesn't age, calls that integrity. I call it cleaning my guest room. The day after the wedding, Evan and Brielle had planned a brunch at a garden cafe with white trellises and a menu that spelled eggs with 3 Gs. I RSVP'd no by not showing up. By then, the honeymoon had deflated and the sweet wow moment had turned into a very public what happened. Harborview's manager emailed me to confirm he'd followed my freight instructions and to thank me for arranging recycling. Your concern for our marsh is appreciated, he wrote. Brielle would later twist that line into a conspiracy theory about me throwing heirlooms into a swamp. There were no heirlooms. Only things she ordered in 3 sizes. Evan called. I let it ring out because my hands were shaking and I don't speak important truths with a tremor. When I felt the steady come back, I called him from the porch. My yard smelled like basil and rain. Mom, he said, and the word broke me a little because boys keep their first words inside their last ones. Why would you why would you do that? Because your wife wished me gone, I said. And I honor wishes. Silence. The kind where you can hear how someone learned to breathe again as a man. She didn't mean. She meant every syllable, I said. She said it with the ease of practice. She was stressed. So was I said, and let the quiet sit between us until it needed a chair. Evan, I loved your day. I did not love being told I did not belong. I will not pay to stay somewhere I have to beg to sit down. He exhaled like he'd been holding someone else's breath. Mom, can we talk about the house? A small thrill of alertness ran through me. What house? The one you showed me last month. The porch. The oak. You said. I said it was pretty, I said, and I wasn't lying. I said some people deserve a porch they can grow old on. I didn't say their names. Brielle told everyone, he said, and there was a ripple in his voice I hadn't heard since he was 12 and tried too hard to sound older. She told her mom, her friends, the videographer. She picked out dishes to match the kitchen. She also told me to stop being part of your family, I said. She doesn't get to pick what parts stay. He went quiet so long I thought the line died. Then he said, so is it still ours? I looked at my lemon-yellow kitchen clock, at the light sliding across the tile like a cat. At 2 p.m, the nurses would be moving their second-hand crib into their second bedroom. At 5 o'clock, I'd be at their place with a casserole and a laundry basket full of baby clothes that live at my house for June. At 7 o'clock, a locksmith would change their locks because that's what you do when you start a family. At 8 o'clock, the porch would hold its first story told with the lights off and the sky loud. No, I said. It isn't. He made a sound like a porch step in winter. How could you? How could I what? Choose people who need me instead of people who don't want me in the picture? Very easily. Mom, he said, and somewhere behind his mom I heard a woman's stage whisper. Put it on speaker. I didn't raise a fool. Evan knows when to turn a phone over. He said quietly, she can hear you. Good, I said. Then I'll say this only once. I won't be bought with access. I won't be punished with absence. If I'm not good enough for a photo, I'm not good enough for a down payment. If you want me in your life, you will make room. If you don't, you won't. Either way, I will be fine. Brielle's voice cut in. You're vindictive. I'm precise, I said. Your wish has terms. I met them. What about the gifts? She snapped. Everyone knows what you did. I redirected what I purchased and recycled what I could, I said. Return labels are on your email. The rest was donated. Enjoy the tax acknowledgements. You humiliated me, she hissed. You handled that yourself at the check-in desk, I said, because I am old enough to be done with polite lies. Evan found his voice. Mom, please. Let's take a breath. We're overwhelmed. You'll be busier this evening, I said, because truth isn't kind or unkind. It's just steady. Get some rest. I hung up and cried in the doorway because even when you win, grief checks the locks. At noon, Brielle posted an Instagram story in a soft, tragic filter. Sometimes people show you who they are, she said into the camera, face dewy, caption cryptic. The comments divided themselves into neat camps, the ones who knew her from Pilates and wrote, "You deserve better, babe," and the ones who recognized Harborview's front desk and wrote, "Girl, you screamed at a 19-year-old." My niece sent me a screen recording and a popcorn emoji. I don't do emojis. I sent her a dot. She knows a dot is me saying that will do. By mid-afternoon, I had visited the nurses with a spare set of house keys and a fern that thrives on neglect. I left them fussing over a shelf and went home to sit with the quiet. I'd thought the house would be the end of it, cut the ribbon, seal the envelope, cue the credits. It wasn't. There was one more gift I'd bought without the cameras rolling. Brielle had a registry item labeled Main Gift. Capital M, capital G. She wanted it to be a showstopper, not the house. I never told her that was mine to give, but a down payment check photographed on a silver tray at brunch so her friends could see. She selected the exact pen she wanted me to use. The pen cost $98. The check was supposed to be for $150,000. Her mother sent me the tray dimensions. I smiled and RSVP'd yes to all of it in my head, and then never showed up. That morning, after the marsh, before lemon bars, I stopped by the bank where I set up the wires. When you've worked at a school, you learn there's always one more form you forgot. I signed two, one to kill future auto drafts for Evan's joint account, which I'd quietly been padding since they got engaged, one to notify vendors that NEL, hail on a wedding invoice meant approval had to come from me. It was fussy work. It felt like spring cleaning. Then, because I know how to sell an ending, I called the title company and said, "Move up my closing." They said, "How far?" I said, "To the hour that hurts." We met at 5:30. At 6:05 p.m., the nurses with the twins owned the house. At 6:18, Evan texted a moving schedule for Tuesday, complete with his new address. At 6:19, the locksmith texted me a photo of a brand new key for someone else's brand new life. At 6:20, I turned my phone off and set it face down on the table like a prayer. The next morning, the fallout arrived on a timeline nobody could control. At 9:10 a.m., Evan and Brielle pulled into the driveway of a house that wasn't theirs and tried the old key because hope is stubborn. It didn't work. He knocked. The taller nurse, hair in a messy bun and a baby on her hip, opened the door with a look that said, "We own this threshold." Where Evan began. "I know who you are," she said gently, like she was offering him a softer version of the world. "And I'm sorry this is how you found out. But this is our home." Brielle went stiff. "There's been a mistake," she said, reaching for a tone she uses on waiters and men named Kyle. "This is our wedding gift." "It was our life raft," the nurse said. Her voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. We closed yesterday." Miss Hale brought lemon bars. Somebody filmed it. Somebody always films it. The clip went everywhere within an hour. Brielle in cream linen telling a new mother she must be wrong about her own front door. The comments, if you can believe it, made me feel kinder than I had in months, because strangers can smell entitlement like rain. At 10:45, Evan's car appeared in my driveway. He didn't text. He didn't knock. He stood on the path like he was 14 again and had broken the neighbor's window with a rogue fastball. I opened my door and let the screen catch between us because a screen keeps the bugs out, not the people, and that distinction matters. "Mom," he said. "What did you do?" "Something I should have done sooner," I said. "Protect my heart." He swallowed. "That house was mine to give or not give," I said. "And I chose not to give it to someone who wished me gone." She was upset. "She was honest," I said, because truth spoken cruelly is still truth. And honesty has consequences. He put his hands on his hips and looked at my azaleas like they had answers. "Mom, I love her." "I know," I said. "I loved your father, and he taught me a trick. When someone shows you how they will treat you when you have nothing they want, treat that as the whole story." "I have never asked you for money," he said, which is the sort of sentence that looks right until you read the footnotes. "You've never had to," I said. "I set your life up so your asks were invisible. That was my mistake." He blinked at me like I was speaking a language he hadn't chosen to learn. Could you at least talk to Brielle? She thinks you humiliated her." "I won't be thrown out of an elevator, so I can ride the stairs," I said. "If she wants to talk to me, she can come to my door alone with an apology and a plan to behave differently. No cameras. No followers. No phrases like, 'my truth.'" He stared at the porch like it might give him the speech I refused to write for him. So there's no house, he said. There are lots of houses, I said, softening. Some are expensive. Some are kind. The kind ones let you in. He looked down at his shoes. We were supposed to fly to Antigua yesterday. I hope you bought travel insurance, I said, and then, because motherhood is a muscle memory, I added, do you want a lemonade? He took it even though he came to argue. He stood on my path in the dappled shade, drinking like a boy who had scraped his knee. Mom, he said low. Did I fail you? I wanted to say no so fast the word would outrun my better sense. I wanted to lift his jaw and tell him he is made of good things. But a son learns his shape by the edges you keep. You forgot I'm your mother, I said. Not your wallet. Not your PR department. Not your scenery. I want to be wanted, not managed. If you can't do that now, I will wait. I waited through colic. I can wait through this. He nodded like a man walking into rain without a hat. Okay, he said, and he left with the lemonade glass because that's what sons do. They carry pieces of you with them and sometimes remember to bring them back. That afternoon, Brielle posted an apology that wasn't one. If anyone felt hurt yesterday, that was never my intention. She tagged a brand of tissues. The comments did not go how she wanted. Her mother posted a photo of the two of them being strong. My sister texted, do you have popcorn? I replied, I have lemon bars. That evening, the nurses invited me to see the crib set up. I brought a bag of tiny socks. We stood in the doorway and watched the twins sleep like synchronized metronomes. The house smelled faintly of new paint and hope. You saved us a decade, the taller nurse said. You saved me a lifetime, I said, and I meant it. Giving to people who are grateful is like watering a plant that actually wants to live. Over the next week, quiet things happened that don't make videos. Evan stopped posting. He started calling his aunt. He took June to the park and forgot to boomerang the swing. Brielle tried 3 different apologies on the internet and none on my porch. A florist DM'd me to say the bridal party tried to stiff them on the late-night pickup fee and then paid when shown the contract with my name. Harborview sent me a thank you basket with local honey and a note that said, you were right about the freight. I sent the honey to the nurses because that's who I am now, a person who moves sweetness where it will be eaten. On Friday, I met with Harriet and booked myself a trip I'd been too careful to take, a train up the coast, 2 weeks, nothing fancy, nothing performative. I will read a novel on a shaky car and eat soup in places where the spoons are heavy. I will talk to no one who makes me feel like I should be smaller to fit their photo. Before I left, I did one more thing people will call petty. I call it symmetrical. Brielle had ordered a monogrammed doormat with their initials for the new house. The courier tried to deliver it to an address that no longer belonged to them. I intercepted the notice at the post office because, again, backbone work belongs to me. I had the mat redirected to my house. When it arrived, I cut the letters off and composted the core. It will feed something green. Then I took the blank mat to a craft store, bought a stencil, and painted one word in the middle, welcome. I put it at the nurse's door. People think revenge is heat. They're wrong. Revenge worth living with runs cool. It hums like a refrigerator and keeps what you need fresh. The day I left for my train trip, I put fresh sheets on my bed, watered the basil, and wrote a note to myself on the kitchen chalkboard, you have already done enough. 2 hours before my train, a car pulled into my driveway. It was Evan. He parked crooked. He didn't text first. He came with his shoulders low and his chin brave. He came alone. Can I come in? He asked. You may, I said, because I am not a gate. I am a woman with a door. He sat at the table where he learned to write his name and now has to learn to speak it again. He rubbed at a water ring like it might tell his future. She won't apologize, he said finally. I know, I said, because pride is a ladder some people would rather fall off than climb down. She keeps saying it's about optics, he said. She keeps saying if you had just stayed out of the way. I stayed out of the way through a decade of dinners where I wasn't asked a single question, I said. I stayed out of the way when her mother told me my shoes were underdressed. I stayed out of the way when I was asked to write checks but not toasts. Sometimes stepping in is the most polite thing left. He stared at his hands, at the callus where a wedding ring now lived. Mom, I can't undo yesterday. Good, I said gently. Yesterday is glue. It holds the shape of today. She says you ruined the start of our marriage. She ruined it with a sentence, I said, and the truth sat between us like a loaf of bread. You can still decide how the rest goes. I don't want to choose between you, he said, eyes wet. I don't want to be that cliché. You are not a split check, I said. Love is not a seesaw. You can love two people and require both to behave. He looked up sharply, and for the first time in months I saw my boy, the one who cried when he stepped on a beetle. She told me if I take your side, I'm taking poverty's side. Then she married the wrong man, I said, and put my hand over his, because that is what one does when a child is losing a religion. He held my hand like it was a rung on a ladder over a river. What do? You go home, I said. You tell your wife that you love your mother, and that making you choose is a fool's math. You tell her that the woman who feeds your child and files your travel insurance is not your enemy. You tell her that until she can be kind without an audience, she will be living without your applause. He nodded like the world had been simplified into something he could lift. Okay, he said. And bring my lemonade glass back when you find it, I added, because even in a storm there is housekeeping. He laughed in the back of his throat and stood. He kissed my cheek like a boy who forgot how to do it and remembered on the way down the hall. At the door, he turned. Mom? Yes. Did you really throw everything into a swamp? No, I said. I threw away the part of me that thought I had to earn a place I already deserved. The train north was smooth and slow. I sat by the window and watched the marsh, and then the pines, and then a tumble of towns with names like old hymns. I ate a sandwich wrapped in paper and cried a little when the conductor said, "Next stop, Florence," for a different reason than most people cry about Florence. I slept like a person who had not left anything burning behind her. 3 days into my trip, my phone buzzed in a museum with floors so polished you could skate on them. It was Evan. She moved in with her mother, he wrote. Says she needs space from your energy. I have plenty, I wrote. Take what you need. Can I come over Friday, he wrote. I'll be home Saturday, I wrote. I'll make biscuits. The museum guard asked me to put my phone away. I did. I stood in front of a painting of a woman in a blue dress holding a letter. No one knows what it says. I do. It says, I finally kept something for myself. A week later, I walked into my house and smelled basil and clean counter. Evan was on my porch steps with June, who ran at me like she was trying to knock a door down. Grandmama, she shouted, and I picked her up even though my back is not 25 anymore. She smelled like crayons and oranges and everything the internet hasn't ruined yet. Inside, Evan handed me the lemonade glass and a paper bag with something wrapped in tissue. She took half her closet, he said quietly. She left the blender. Return label is on her email, I said, and he snorted like a man who knows a joke when it walks into the room wearing a tie. What's this? I asked, lifting the tissue. A door knocker, he said, eyes careful. I found it at a salvage shop. I thought, you might want one for your back door. It wasn't my husband's. You can't replace that kind of thing. But it was heavy and brass, and when I knocked it against my table it sounded like someone announcing good news. Let's hang it, I said. We did. The three of us. June held the screws and took her job too seriously like children do. Evan climbed the little step stool like a boy in a man suit. I held the plate and the level like an engineer of small mercies. When it was up, we stepped back. The house nodded. Mom? Evan said. Yes. Do you forgive me? I thought about forgiveness like currency, like a thing that gets spent and never grows back. I thought about it like water, like a thing that returns no matter what you build. I thought about my lemon bars and my train ticket and my porch. I thought about how much of me he carries in the way he ties his shoes. I forgive you for the parts you didn't know were happening, I said. For the rest, I'm waiting for time to do its work. Bring a hammer and nails. We'll build while we wait. He put his head on my shoulder the way he used to when cartoons were too loud. June asked if she could knock the new knocker twice, and I told her she could wake the whole neighborhood. That night, I baked biscuits. We ate them with honey from the Harborview basket because even petty stories deserve a sweet ending. Evan said he'd started seeing a counselor. He said the word boundary like someone learning a new instrument. I put more honey on his plate. Brielle texted 3 days later. Not a video, not a caption. 6 words. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. It is not the apology I wanted. It is the only one I'm likely to get this year. I did not reply. Apologies are best followed by a doorbell. Weeks passed. The internet, hungry and faithless, moved on to other dramas. Evan stopped training his camera on his life and started living it. He took the job in Somerville he'd been putting off because the title wasn't flashy. He learned to budget. He sat with his mistakes without narrating them for strangers. Every few days he came by with June and a grocery store bouquet that didn't match anything in my house. We put them in water and made it work. I visited the nurses with the twins, who had learned to smile in their sleep. The porch smelled like laundry and stew. The brass door knocker gleamed like it was proud of itself. I put the welcome mat down with my painted word facing the street so strangers would know what kind of house this is. On a Tuesday, I took my saved-up travel credit and bought a plane ticket to a place with waterfalls. I booked it in my name with my card for me. I printed the itinerary and slid it into a drawer next to my will and the letter I'd written Evan the day he first left for college, and I learned what silence weighs. On top of the itinerary, I put a note, "For Lillian, from Lillian. No permission required." On a Wednesday, Brielle came to my door. She came alone. She wore no cream linen. She wore a face. She looked small on my porch, and I reminded myself that smallness is not the same as goodness and not the same as guilt. "I shouldn't have said it," she began, and her voice was not stage-ready. I wanted your money and not you. "That is an honest sentence," I said. "It's a start." "I was raised to perform," she said, eyes wet. "I don't know how to be loved in the quiet parts." "Then your work," I said, "is to learn." She nodded like someone given the first exercise in a physical therapy that will take months. "Evan says you sold the house the same day as the wedding." "I did," I said. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I don't owe you the kind of communication you won't give back," I said, and then, because truth can be a hammer or a ruler, and I chose ruler, I added, "I will always feed June. I will not feed your audience." She inhaled, exhaled, looked at the mat that used to be hers in theory, then at me. "I want to be better," she said. "Then you will be," I said, "because I am old enough to know people change when it costs them something." She left without a hug. I closed my door and felt no need to narrate what had just happened to anyone, which is how I knew I was free. The day summer shifted its weight toward fall. A thick envelope arrived with Nora's return address. Inside was the final statement from the sale of the house, net proceeds neatly listed, all the little fees accounted for. There was also a note. "Thought you'd want to know. The nurses started a tiny library in their yard. Your knocker looks good." I took a pen and wrote myself a check from my trust for an amount that would not change the world. Then I changed 3 little worlds. I put a deposit down for June's college fund so future June could choose something wild. I funded the school's emergency snack closet because small hunger is the enemy of learning and I know the taste of it. I bought a dozen transit cards and left them at the shelter where the women eat beans and practice walking through doors without flinching. The last thing I sold? Not the house, not the registry fantasy, not the honeymoon to a woman who didn't know how to say thank you. The last thing I sold was the story I had told myself that love means staying quiet. I got a good price. If you're still here, you've watched a grandmother go from logistics to liberation. Maybe someone has wished you out of a family you paid to light. If so, this is your permission to keep your matches. Light your own porch. Paint your own mat. Hang your own knocker. When they finally knock, because they will, answer if you want to. Or don't. Either way, make sure the first person who gets welcomed is you.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!